Hello guys, welcome to Subcode, and today we are looking at another cup of code, and we'll be talking all things Spring profiles. So we want to see how we can actually initialize our Spring projects for each different environment and have configs that are specific to each environment. Can be dev, QA or UAT, and prod. So we want to see how we can set up our application properties for each of these different environments, and it can be specific to each one. So without wasting any of your time, you know how we do it here. We start on our Spring initializer on start.spring.io, and then we have our project definition, which is a Muffin-based project, and then that is Java, and we always use the latest stable Spring Boot version, which is 3.2.1, and then we have the metadata, and our group will be .zip code, and then our artifact will be Spring profile. So this is our application name, and that's why we're using it the same place here, or the same value here. And then we have our description, which is demo Spring project. So basically then the package name will be com.zipcode.spring profiles, and then our packaging will be a jar, and then we have a Java version, and we're using 17, which is what we will be running our project on. So basically we have a few dependencies, nothing heavy, nothing hectic. So we have Lombok in case we want to have our pojos, and then we'll be able to access some boilerplate code, and then we also have Spring Boot DevTools. This is just for live reload, so that the application can boot up if you have any changes on our code base. And the last one will be the Spring Web, because we want to scaffold an API or microservice. So basically this will be an API, sort of a project. So what we want to see is how we can have different configs or different properties for different environments. So how we get to do that, let's get to see it in action. Before we get to the code base, we'll share the repository as well. So I will share this link down in the description down below. So do check that out if you're interested in checking out the repo, and also the initializer config. I will share that in the description down below. So please do check that out. And then one other thing that we need to check is basically how to deploy our artifact in Nexus repo, but this I will take you through I think on a different tutorial. But for now I just want to show you that we can be able to deploy our components or artifacts into Nexus repo for each of our environments, and then we can see what was deployed to each specific environment. So now I'm using localhost, so that's why I have the snapshots only right here. So that is fine, and we can go to our code base and see this in action. So we'll be testing the application on localhost 8080. So as you can see, the profile that we're on now is prod. So let's see our code base on our Spring Tool suite. So this project is basically a light project. So we just have the project itself, and there's nothing hectic happening here, nothing fancy. And what we have is just one home controller class that we have, and the controller is basically annotation, REST controller, and we also have the request mapping, which is the root request mapping. And then we actually have a properties or a config that we are pulling from the application.properties, which is SP environment, and we want to see the environment value. And then we have a get method right here, so a get mapping, and then it's just a string home, and then it says welcome to that particular environment, and then we say profile. So what we see here on our application, so welcome to prod profile. So it means we are running this application in the prod environment. Essentially we're trying to achieve that. So if you look at let's just go to say this is our, let's say, run configurations, and we want to do a Maven build. And in our Maven build configuration, or let's say this is your deployment descriptor for your application, you can basically just specify a number of things here. or a number of variables that you want. So we are doing a Spring Boot run, and we want to set the Spring Boot run profiles. And from the profiles that we have, these are the profiles that we have: localhost, dev, UAT, and prod. So now let's do a UAT run, and then let's say apply. Let me say close because this is still running. Let me just stop that, and then now I'm gonna say run configuration, and we are on the Maven one, and I will say run that. And now let's see what it does. So that's just self4j, and then it's building the properties as it's building the project artifacts, then it's starting up the project, and the profile that we have is UAT. So now if I go back to my local host right here and I refresh that, and now the profile is UAT. So now let me show you how we get to achieve this. So in our project we have the application properties, which is that, and basically that has the environment, which is localhost. So by default it will load this one, that's why I had the localhost one. And then we have the string profile active, and that basically is just dependent on these variables that will be picked up from Maven. Spring profiles active, and these can be custom to your preference, and you can use it in the same way. But because we're using Spring Run profiles, so we want to set the Spring profiles active to that particular value that we have on our Maven description. So with that, now let me show you the dev one. In dev, our SP environment is dev. In our prod, it's SP environment prod, and we also have application UAT properties, which is just SP UAT. So each of these specific config files, or each of these property files, you essentially can define anything that is specific to that environment. You can specify um, let's say a prod username or JWT secret for each of these environments. You can specify the data source for each of these environments. You can specify the logging level for each of these environments, for each of these properties, and all of these will kick in based on the environment that you're running. And then based on the Maven description or your deployment description, it will then pick up that we are running a UAT, a dev, a UAT, or a prod environment, and will pick up all of those properties and use them according to that specific environment, so you don't have to stress about that. So in the same way with Maven, you can define this, and actually you can also use Jenkins. Let's say you're using Jenkins to deploy your artifact. You can define all of this on your deployment descriptor on how you want the profiles to be handled, and then Maven will take care of the building the artifacts, and then pushing those to your Nexus dir just here, pushing those to your Nexus dir, the artifact, the deployment artifacts, and then to release that accordingly if you are using Jenkins. So you obviously need to define the entire pipeline as to what happens on each step of the pipeline, and it will basically achieve the same thing that we are trying to do here with our Maven Spring Run. So let me just go to run configuration. So what we're trying to achieve here, the goals that we have is just to Spring Boot run that particular environment. And then also if we do dev and then we say apply, let me just close this and stop it here, and then come back and do a run as, and then let's say run, because now in dev, so it will run the application, it will build the artifact, package it, and then run the application for us, and then we can come back and just do a refresh to see it right here. So now you see welcome to dev profile, and the application is still the same and it's still intact. So that is looking good. And then now the one thing that I wanted to show you with all of these profiles, you need to define them in your pom.xml. So let me just show you that. Let's go to our pom.xml. Let's look at that guy. Right, so we have the artifact definition, artifact ID, version, and all of those. So that's fine. And we basically want to look at the profiles. So just after the properties, and we add our profiles right here. So we say the profile. So by default, we want to activate the local host. That's why we have this property activation, activate by default, which is true. And then the properties is basically Spring profiles active is localhost. And then we have all these other profiles defined here as well, dev, UAT, and prod. So the profiles are just all of that, and that's basically what we need for our profiles to take effect, and that looks good and we're happy with that. So with those profiles being available, we can then be able to come to our um, configuration, Maven build configuration, and also we just add them here, the profiles that we have, localhost, dev, UAT, and prod, and then we tell our goal or deployment descriptor what we want to do. So if I say deploy, it will want to push my artifacts into my Nexus dir, which is here, but then to do that, what you will see, it will build my artifact into the target folder of the application, which is this. So this is the entire artifact, and it will just take the jar and the pom, and then the let me just show you which files it will take. It will take the pom, pom.md5, and the sha1. So all of these the deployment artifacts that it will need to deploy to your particular environment. And then the jar is also supposed to be here. It just has, I think the user that I'm using doesn't have all the access roles to upload the jar, because it keeps on like failing to upload the jar, but it should basically do the same thing, push all of these three files and then push the jar as well for this deployment, and you'll be able to see all the artifacts like that. And for each environment, you'll see all the artifacts that were deployed in that particular environment via Nexus repository, and that basically um, will solve for all of the concerns or as to how you can have your application properties for each specific environment. And these hardly change, so you would hardly touch these files. You pretty much set up the properties as and when you need them, and you're most likely to touch this once in a while, or once in a couple of months if you need a new property set or a new property updated, and basically that's it. And if it's a flexible property, or it's picked up from a different config, or like a deployment descriptor like we're doing here, you can just change the value in one place and then it will pick up the value in across all the property files. You don't even need to worry about them. So things like this, and we can just also change that to, let's say now we want UAT again, and then we say apply, say close this, and then we just stop, and then we just run it again, and Maven build, and to run our build as we defined it, and it will go through and start the application at the, so as you can see, the following one profile is active, which is UAT, and that is what we wanted. And when we come back here, we refresh, now on UAT. So as you can see, we are able to pick up this very same variable across all our different environments by just defining on the deployment descriptor which environment we want to execute, and it gives us that particular environment. So this basically allows us to see how in Spring Boot we can achieve setting specific environment to specific configurations or specific properties. And essentially this is it. I just want to keep it short and sweet. We can go deeper into like creating environment specific beans, but for now I just want to show you that you can do this. And also if you want to see the hard-coded way of doing it. Let me just stop this, and then I can just change this value to say let's just do, let's say dev, and I save this, and then I say run this as a Spring Boot application. Let me just do Spring Boot. Let me just run this one. I want to run the Spring Boot application. Let's just see, should come up in a few. Let's see. Okay, now it's coming up. All right, and you will see that it will also tell you the following one profile is active. Let me just see. The following one profile is active, which is dev, like we defined here. So let's just make sure our pod is already in use. So I was testing the Maven deployment, so let me just make sure that there's nothing happening there. Let me just make sure. Okay, let me close this guy. Pod ID is 69524, right? So now let's check again. So there's nothing running there, so we should be able to just run that, and it should come up and be in dev, and everything should be in place, right? Started successfully. Now when you come back here, refresh, and then now you can see welcome to Spring Profile dev environment. So as you can see, we have the dev environment running, and we can see our changes that we did to welcome Spring Profile and dev environment. You can see right there. So now if I come back here and just say let's say UAT and save that. So please note that the variable that we're looking at is ASP environment, which is basically this variable here. And this variable on this file that I'm changing, the default one, it's not this SP. It's just the profile that I want to run, and you'll be able to pick up which profile is available because my profiles are defined in my pom.xml right here. So the profiles are defined here, and it's able to pick that up and be able to come and execute this particular environment right here. So that looks good, and let's just go to okay, now we're on UAT, and let's just save this, make sure everything is good, and then let's come back, refresh. Let's see, did our dev tools pick up that there are changes here? Okay, let's just restart that, and it's fine, just restart that, and then let's have a look. Cool, so now you can see we restarted, and then picked up that the active profile is UAT. And now let's come back, and UAT environment is active. So you can set anything on all these different environments, and it will be able to pick them up. Your data source, you can connect to a dev database, UAT database, you can connect to a PROD database, and it will be able to pick up the changes as according to what you prefer. So basically, this is what we wanted to showcase, and I hope you do like and subscribe. Until next time, cheers for now.